Welcome to Policy Chats, the official podcast of the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. I'm your host, Dori Pham. Join me and my fellow public policy classmates as we explore potential policy solutions for today's most pressing societal challenges. Thank you so much for joining us today, Treasurer Ma. We are truly honored to have you on the Policy Chats podcast. As the 34th State Treasurer of California, serving your role since 2019, you have played a vital role in managing the state's finances, overseeing trillions of dollars in transactions, and supporting investment that impact millions of Californians. Your career in public service has been remarkable, from your start in the California State Assembly as Speaker pro tempore to your time on the California Board of Equalization, and now leading the Treasurer's Office through both economic opportunities and financial challenges. Representing the world's fourth largest economy, your work touches nearly every aspect of life in California, from infrastructures to investment and housing to public education, funding, and sustainable development. With our school celebrating its 10-year anniversary under the theme Creating a Thriving, Prosperous, and Abundant World, we are eager to hear your insight on how financial policy, strategic investments, and collaborative partnerships can strengthen the future of public higher education and economic growth across the state. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Since 2019, So let's move to the first question. Since 2019, you have served as California State Treasurer, overseeing the state's finances and guiding major investments. For our listeners who may not be as familiar, can you share what the Treasurer's Office is responsible for and why is it so important for California's economy and future, especially given that California has the largest economy in the United States and the fourth largest in the world?
Thank you. Thank you, Dori. Yes. So the Treasurer is one of 8 constitutional offices in the state of California since 1849. That means we run statewide: the governor, lieutenant governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Treasurer, Controller, Insurance Commissioner, and Superintendent of Public Instruction. So my job is the banker. So all of the revenues, the taxes, the fees, the interest, the penalties go into my office. It's about $3 trillion every year. I manage the state's short-term portfolio, so the idle funds that the state is not using, as well as the idle funds for 2,200 local governments and special districts. So that balance today is about $160 billion, and it is invested in short-term investments like treasury, notes and bills, and then some commercial paper. And then I also issue all the bonds for the state of California, as well as the UC and CSU systems, to fund infrastructure needs, the roads and the bridges and all of the buildings that you are all in at UC Riverside. I also fund and finance affordable housing, public transportation, schools, children's hospitals, regular hospitals, and emergency crisis beds, private higher educational institutions, and I have a lot of small business programs and green energy, advanced manufacturing incentives, and then also oversee 4 savings programs: Scholarshare 529, Cal Savers, Cal Able, and our new program, Hope Accounts, and I can talk a little bit about that as well. I also sit on CalPERS and CalSTRS, the California Earthquake Authority, the iBank, the California Housing Finance Authority, and a few more. So like you said, Dori, my office touches everything that is happening here in the state of California.
Thank you, Treasurer Ma. That's so remarkable. Thank you for letting us know about the role of the Treasurer's Office in funding so many important infrastructure and social support programs here in the state of California. Now, moving on to the next question. California is currently facing a $20 billion budget deficit. Because the state constitution requires a governor to submit a balanced budget where spending does not exceed revenue, the state will likely need to make cuts. Earlier this year, Governor Gavin Newsom proposed an 8% reduction in state funding for the UC and CSU systems, which would definitely impact higher education. Given these budget constraints, what are your thoughts on long-term sustainable financing models that will help the UC and CSU campuses maintain their shared values of equity and achievement?
Yes. So we have good times and we have, deficit times. And hopefully, when there are good times, we are putting away money to weather us in the storm. And that's what Jerry Brown did when he was governor for 8 years. He really set up our 4 rainy day funds, put as much money as we can into it. And so that is helping to sustain us over these deficit periods. Clearly the UC, CSU systems, depend on funding from the state budget. During these deficit times, I know that the governor has proposed certain cutbacks, but there is also compact arrangements with the CSU systems, for example, where we are committed to paying back what we normally fund, the systems, during a normal year. The community colleges are funded through Prop 98. So as long as the state is doing well, the community colleges are also getting their fair share as well. So what can be done for more stable revenue sources? Well, I do think that the UC systems, I've met with many presidents, that they are trying to figure out creative ways to be able to generate more stable funding instead of having to depend on the state's general fund. I know that at UC Berkeley, for example, the new chancellor, he is an economics professor by training. And so he is really capitalizing on our tech ecosystem up here, our Silicon Valley, and they are putting some of their money into private equity investments, since private equity tends to generate a greater return than, all the other securities, public equity, for example. So he is figuring that out. I met with Dr. Luke Wood of Sacramento State. I just met with Dr. Harper of CSU Bakersfield, and they are also trying to figure out how to better utilize their land, for example, so that they can generate, rental revenues, or even enter into profit sharing models with some of their tenants if they are able to build on some of their college land. So I think everybody is thinking about it. It's not easy, right? But hopefully, I know that during COVID, the state had record surpluses, and so the governor did fully fund the UC and the CSUs, and hopefully a little bit more. But now, there's always feast and famine. And so right now we are going through that famine phase. So not easy to talk about cuts, to make cuts, to see cuts when people are dependent and used to certain programs and services like all of you on campus.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer, Treasurer Ma. So like you mentioned, both the California State University and the University of California systems, they depend heavily on state funding. With about 60% of the CSU budget and 43% of the UC budget coming from the state's general fund, they rely heavily on like the state budget. So the UC system are anticipating additional revenue from tuition and fees in the coming years because of the proposed cuts. So, what are some financial tools or policy approaches can be used to ease the burden on students and families while still supporting the long-term needs of these institutions?
Yes. So I'm a big proponent of savings. I chair the Scholarshare 529 plan, which is intended to keep students out of high student loan debt by encouraging, their families to start saving early. My parents started saving for me, my brother, and sister as soon as we were born for college so that we did not have to go into high student loan debt, because we know that after you all graduate, it's going to be hard to pay off because many of these loans have high interest. So that has been definitely a priority. I would say that there are opportunities perhaps to enter into public-private partnerships with various companies and industries that are based here, that are leading the nation here, like the aeronautics industry, gaming, music, believe it or not, tech, AI, cybersecurity, and many electric vehicles, right? Sustainable, EV infrastructure, battery storage, all of the things that we are all talking about every single day. And many of these companies want to stay here because of the high quality of our students, the workforce, the ingenuity, the can-do attitude, the entrepreneurial spirit. So is there an opportunity to partner with them where they can actually help build curriculum so that the students that are going to your school, for example, are actually meeting mentors during their 4 years, having paid internships, and then hopefully that will generate permanent jobs because the job market is very, very tight and competitive as well. So, having these companies, I know in the Silicon Valley now, after all these years, many of the tech companies, they want to stay here, but attracting employees, especially from out of state with the high cost of living and lack of affordable housing has been a challenge. So many of the tech companies now are setting aside money to actually build more housing so that they can keep their existing workforce and attract new people. So there are opportunities. I think the UC and CSU systems are not used to reaching out to some of these companies in really trying to establish these long-term public-private partnerships. Typically, universities will reach out to their alumni or donors for naming opportunities, right, for their buildings, but it is not enough these days to continue to sustain the working capital that the universities and CSUs need for the long term. And if we are able to decrease our tuition and fees so that it is more affordable for more of our students to attend without having to, have high student loan debt is definitely a priority for me.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Ma, for letting us know about different approaches and tools that we can use to ease student burden, especially during this farming period, as you mentioned earlier. Now, many UC and CSU campuses have partnerships with private institutions to add housing and other facilities when budget is tight. At UC Riverside, for example, the Dundee Residence Hall was delivered through a partnership with the American Campus Communities and is operated in conjunction with UCR Housing. From your seat as State Treasurer, what guardrails and financing standards help the state encourage these public-private partnerships while protecting student affordability and the public mission of higher education? Summarily, I'm trying to ask, what is the Treasurer's role in ensuring that equity is considered when public institutions in the states are having partnership with private ones? And could you share an example of when this approach worked well and one lesson from a public and private partnership that was more challenging?
Okay, so we did embark on our first student housing project at Santa Rosa Community College. I think it was a 350 24 unit building, which has made a huge difference for that campus. And what is interesting about that model is that, a developer, got the funding sources, put together their capital stack, but the housing is run by the university or the college. So they are able to keep a couple of rooms, 4 or 5 rooms open in case there are students that need the housing that just can't afford it. So I think doing the public-private partnerships is great. But like you said, if we're going to ensure equity, for those residents, it has to be affordable, and it should be run by the university or even a nonprofit who is not so focused on the bottom line, right, every single day. Because, college students, community college, UC students, they all have different income levels. And if they can't afford to live on campus, like CSU Bakersfield, 80% of their housing, student housing units are empty because people just can't afford it. They would rather drive an hour from their house versus staying on campus because it is not within reach. So, we see it all the time. Some of the colleges and the UCs, they do have excess land that they can build housing. They are looking at it. They're not really in the business of building housing. So that's kind of a mindset, because you have to perhaps hire someone who is going to handle the construction and, housing projects on campus, which is a new thing. But it can be done and it should be done. So, housing is a crisis when students go to a university and they are supposed to be guaranteed housing for maybe 1 year or 2 years, and they can't get the housing. Well, the capacity is going to decrease. And then the pressures on balancing the budget also increase. So if we could build more housing, we can accommodate more students, that would help lower the cost, or at least not increase the cost, for the tuition and fees, to the students. I think that would definitely help on all the campuses.
I have follow-up question to your answer. First of all, thank you so much for your insightful answer. My question to you is, with all of the like you said, with all the new admitted students coming in because of more housing on campus, is there any way that we can, like, is there a guardrail where the school doesn't admit super exceeding large amount of students, and where they cannot control the outcome of the students' learning, like the quality of the students' learning?
I think that is a concern. Some colleges specialize in small groups. Other colleges, may have 500 people, in a lecture room. So it all really depends. But I do think after COVID, where we have seen what it's like to go online, to have a hybrid system, with AI coming, on board, things should be more efficient and more effective. And it doesn't have to be that traditional model where 500 people necessarily have to sit in a chair in a big lecture hall. 500 people, could be on a Zoom call, and therefore, the learning, those that want to go in person can go in person, because some people like me, I learn better when I'm sitting in the front row in front of the teacher. But some people, because of cost or because of time considerations, having, conflicting, personal issues, some people may be able to do it online. And also, you can also charge those students as well.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question. The theme for the UCR School of Public Policy 10-year anniversary is creating a thriving, prosperous, and abundant world. In that spirit, how would you envision financial policy and investment decisions at the state level working toward a thriving, prosperous, and abundant world, especially in regards to public higher education.
Yes. So the California's budget is highly dependent on personal income tax, corporation tax, and sales taxes. That represents about 90% of our general fund. And the UCs and the CSUs are funded out of that general fund. So what does that mean? It means that we have to have high quality paying jobs. It means that during COVID, for example, a lot of the tech companies were growing, right? Hiring, merging. And so their stock options, their bonuses, and if they went IPO, amazing, right? Because then those tax revenues come back to the state of California. Also during COVID, we were all at home, so we couldn't travel, but we were all spending money still online, eating at restaurants or ordering from restaurants, ordering cars and trucks and boats, whatever it was, because we're all here. So our sales taxes also were very high. And that's why we saw the two highest surplus years during COVID. $46 billion surplus year one, year two of COVID, $96 billion of surplus, right? So you can see, because of the way our finances are, we need to generate and keep high quality jobs here. So one of my main jobs, tasks that I have taken on is really trying to be that economic ambassador. There are a lot of investors who want to come to California because of our ecosystem, our diversity, our commitment to climate change, but they don't necessarily know where to invest, who to go to, what regions are going to be easier to do business than others. And so I act as that liaison to try to matchmake these investors and these companies and in these industries with those cities and counties that are looking, to expand with those type of jobs and with that type of, company. So I think it's important. The Palisades, the recent Palisades fire, they had many families that had lived many generations here that were doing well, especially when, they were, many of them are maybe in the Hollywood sector. And so when Tom Cruise makes Mission Impossible and it's a blockbuster and he lives here in California, well, we make money on his salary. And normally some of it is filmed in California. So all the businesses around them, the small businesses, the caterers, the hairdressers, right? The makeup artists, they're all making money too and paying taxes. So it is so important that we keep jobs here, that we attract high quality jobs here. But part of that challenge is the high cost of living, housing, people not able to, find housing, right? We have a shortage on teachers and doctors, specialists that, have choices. Can they move someplace else, or do they want to be here in California? I think they want to be here in California, but then they have to balance everything else out, right? So again, personal income tax, corporation tax, and sales taxes. We also have to be focused on that. We cannot drive out the billionaires. We cannot, have these companies that have been headquartered here for years move to another state because they're taking their jobs, right? So that is also my focus, since I'm an accountant. And, I'm a banker right now and finance person, economics. So you always have to think about how we're going to generate revenues so that we can continue all of the programs and the services. Like, I would love to go back to the model 30 years ago when the UC and CSUs were almost free, right? But how do we do that? Again, we have to generate more money in the general fund. So, you all are young. You're all going to be working. You're all going to have an impact. You're using your voice through this podcast to understand and to get the message out to others about how, our state works. And so it is very, very important that we are also, open for business. I always say California is open for business. And they say, okay, well, who do we go to? And so I say, okay, myself, and then cities and counties also have to do their job and roll out the red carpet like many of these other states are doing. We cannot keep losing, high net worth individuals, companies that are, providing and creating these high quality jobs to other states or even other nations.
Strengthen your resilience at the 8th Annual Persist Women's Political Engagement Conference on Tuesday, November 4th on the UC Riverside campus. Whether you're aiming to run for office, drive change in a nonprofit, lobby for causes, or activate communities, Persist is designed to empower you. Learn more and register by visiting persist.ucr.edu or via our show notes.
Thank you very much, Treasurer, for letting us know more about California's economic history, such as the surplus years and, the sources of revenue, the high sources of revenue, which include the income and sales taxes. And also thank you for letting us know about your role as the economic liaison for the state. Now, looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest financial opportunity and
Just
risk?
before that, so sorry, Paula, to cut you off.
That's okay.
I have a follow-up for your answer just right now. So you mentioned we, as the state of California, we want to keep billionaires so they can keep continuing to pay tax and to fund the general state fund. But when you recently there's a increase in trends that billionaires are moving out of the state of California, and they are moving someplace else because the tax rate is too high. Is there anything that your office is doing to retain those billionaires, millionaires from moving out the state of California to a different state or a different country and moving
Yes.
their assets out? Yeah.
Yes. So we do have some incentive programs, some, grants and loan and bond programs. So we are actively out there trying to let these companies know that we can help them and, walking them through the process so that they can be successful. I think part of it is having someone to call. Having someone who returns phone calls, right? When people become frustrated because you send an email and you don't get a call back or a response back, you try going to some office and the office is closed, nobody's calling you back, well, you get frustrated. So we need to change our attitude a little bit here in California and be more constituent friendly, right? Like on your campus, when you go to some office or call your professor, or perhaps it's, another program that you're interested in, if you don't get those calls back, you're going to stop calling, right? And then you're going to be like, well, I don't feel like they care about this program or they care about us, having these opportunities. And it just starts snowballing. So, for me, I tell people all the time that we need to be focused on our constituents, right? Especially in government. The taxpayers pay our salary. You are my bosses. Nobody else is my boss. Okay, so I need to be responsive to you, and that should trickle down throughout government, because everybody that wants to do business here, that wants to go to school here, that wants to access a program or service, essentially works with a government agency to be able to, get registered and, follow up and whatever it is that they're seeking. And so government has to change our attitude a little bit and, again, be more forthcoming, be more constituent friendly, be more proactive instead of reactive, and make sure that if someone goes on vacation or is ill, that someone else is picking up the slack, and that it is not dependent on that one person to handle, all of whatever the issue is, because that person, when they come back to work, they're not going to be able to go through and get through all the backlog. So you have to have redundancies. You have to think about who is going to take over your job, succession planning. That makes good management throughout government, throughout your school, right? To know that there's stability and that there is a plan. You need to create a strategic plan. You need to create multi-year budgets, and you have to plan for the good times and the bad times. And you just cannot be, one day, the budget is not good, and all of a sudden people are like, whoa, what are we going to do? It creates chaos. So, the more planning you can do financially is definitely going to help your university in your life as well, but the state of California.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer, which ties back, in your big belief, which is savings. Savings is all about planning ahead and preparing for like the worst. But you also mentioned previously, you want to like, California wants to like keep the high paying jobs and keep like, keep increasing the high wage. But higher salaries can contribute to inflation. And it sometimes is also called wage push inflation, because when you increase salary, then businesses have to increase their costs as well. So how do you make sure that to like reduce that amount of inflation, or not reduce but like stop that sorry, how do you make sure that that inflation is not going out of hand, or like not growing as fast, because we know that inflation happens every year. So
yeah, so that's really the federal government's job is to try to predict and to decrease, inflation through monetary means, right? Whether they're going to raise the interest rates to slow down spending or not. So every couple months, the feds have a meeting, and they look at all of the numbers, the employment, the construction starts, the GDP, and obviously inflation, to try to figure out whether we are, on pace at that 2%, or if it's too high, then they're going to have to increase the rates to kind of slow things down. But make no mistake, these tariffs are costs. Tariffs equal taxes on consumers. So the fact that this administration, set all these tariffs on every single country, when he first got into office, that creates a lot of chaos in our markets. Now, food coming from Mexico, for example, they had to pay the tariffs at the border. Otherwise, the food was not going to come in. And the food cannot sit in a truck for very long because, it has a shelf life. So they increased their cost to get the food over here. Then everybody increases the cost. And ultimately, it goes down to the consumer. So tariffs are something that we should all be, against, unless there is a reason, right? A real trade imbalance reason why, a tariff needs to be assessed. And I believe Congress is the one authorized to assess these tariffs, not the president, by himself. And so we are seeing what's going to happen in the courts. But yes, the federal government is really in charge of trying to watch our inflation numbers and make sure through monetary policy that we are sustaining a level or a balance in our spending and our inflation numbers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Treasurer, for letting us know more about the federal government's role in placing monetary policy in order to ensure that the economy goes well, and also the role of tariffs as a tool of trade. Now, looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest financial opportunity and risk for California's public higher education system? And what role can your office play in helping the public schools navigate this in a way that centers students and equity?
Yeah. Working closely with our presidents and our chancellors, I think listening to them because, they're the ones that have to make those decisions based on what is happening at the state level, but as well as what's happening on their campuses. So, trying to get them to think outside the box, work with them from the state level to try to create some creative programs so that it can generate more revenues. I think that's what I have been doing here in my office. And again, we have to look at public-private partnerships. There's just not enough money to be able to fix all of the infrastructure, to build all of the buildings you want on campus, all the housing, right? And so is there a way to better partner, with our private sector, the businesses here, to keep them here and to have them, teach or know that the next generation is learning the skills that will help them with their bottom line, I think is crucial, and we don't do enough of that. Everyone stays in their silos too much, but I think as we are trying to grow to be maybe the third largest economy, we're going to have to do certain things to accommodate, right? Decrease the high cost of housing, for example, bring insurance companies back to the state of California, make sure that we are not, hopefully not assessing these high tariffs, which affects all of the port products that are coming through, our various ports. I mean, every obstacle, every tax, fee, fine that you impose on a product is going to cost more ultimately for the consumers. And then we are either going to have to make more, which is not easy, or we're going to have to figure out how to cut expenses, within our own budget, because we all have our own budget as well that we have to meet every month.
Thank you very much, Treasurer, for your responses, especially in helping the state and its constituents navigate areas of economic downturn. And now, because I know you mentioned revenue sources, you mentioned that the biggest sources of revenue for the state is personal income and sales taxes and corporate taxes. I was also wondering if you believe there are any unexplored sources of revenue for the state, sources of revenue that the state isn't tapping into in order to reduce the risk of cutting higher education funding during times of economic downturn.
Yeah. We, because we're so highly dependent on those three sources of revenues, over the years, many governors and legislators have been looking at ways to broaden, our tax base. However, it is not easy because to remove an existing revenue source, you have to replace it with another revenue source. Or if you're going to suspend for a couple years, you can maybe suspend it like what happened after our 2008 Great Recession. But eventually, you have to get back to, fully funding, that, to backfill, that expense or that cost or that revenue. So it's not easy. Any new tax has to pass by 2/3 of the legislature, or it has to go to the ballot so that the voters can vote on any sort of revenue measure. So it is not easy. I mean, we have talked about having a sugar tax, on, our candy tax, alcohol tax, on beer and wine. There's lots of a drilling tax, but we don't have many, drilling oil fields left here in California. So that's getting to be less and less of a option. But whatever you all have, let us know. That's your opportunity to let your administrators know on campus to come to Sacramento during UC Lobby Day, to even lobby and show up at your local city council meetings and your county board of supervisors to talk about what is happening on your campus and what are some of their ideas to generate additional revenues. What are other states doing? Best practices. That could be part of your assignment. The School of Public Policy is to ask your fellow students, hey, California is highly dependent on these 3 revenue sources. What are other states doing? And you will see that every state has different ways to balance their budget. Some charge sales taxes, some do not. Some charge income taxes, some do not. Some property taxes are higher, right, to fund the budget. Our property taxes, are pretty stable because we don't want property taxes to jump up where people cannot afford to stay in their homes. So under Prop 13, that's, the way that we have really tried to keep longtime, homeowners in their homes, as well as keep our rental incomes, at a affordable level, so that it's not always bust and boom and people are not sure they can pay, their rent or their, mortgage every year. So every state is different. I look forward to any ideas, good ideas that you all may have, that you all are supporting, your generation.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Ma. I know you just mentioned best practices and possible sources of revenue. I was wondering what the current consensus is on leasing free public land and buildings that are left abandoned. I was wondering the state consensus on that as a source of revenue.
Yeah, so the governor, this governor essentially declared any surplus land has to go for affordable housing, first and foremost. And so, this is a policy decision. Not sure whether it is appropriate for all types of land. Some of them may be in the, the back country, it's not easy to be built on, right? And so I think, having a policy like that, first and foremost, is hopefully going to generate more housing. But, everybody, I think it's not one size fits all in the state of California. We have 58 counties. They are all very, very different. I go to all 58 counties. Their priorities are different. Their demographics are different. Their priorities, it's just all different. So I don't think there is a one size fits all, but having that policy about surplus state land going to housing, I think is reasonable, since housing is at a crisis here in the state of California. What other questions did you have about, what was there, a part 2?
Personally, I don't believe I have any other questions concerning best practices. But now that you ask, I was also thinking about putting forward naming rights, because I do know in some other countries that is also a tool used to increase revenue, whereby constituents are allowed to pay for naming rights to certain parts of the state or city. So I was wondering if this is a best practice and how feasible this could be in the future in the state of California.
Yeah, absolutely. Naming rights is big money for stadiums, for example, for alumni who want to give back to their alma mater. So I know that the UC and the CSUs are very proactive in terms of generating revenues from naming rights. And we could do more. Right? And we could work with those private sectors that want a closer collaboration. For example, with UCR, building the buildings, having them build the buildings for the students instead of using your bond money, which you have to all pay. The UC system has to pay back, right? So there are real creative ways to be able to, to increase capacity at your schools, whether it's housing or different campus buildings, and partnering with the outside private sector who wants to name the building and perhaps wants to encourage more programming so that, again, the next generation is thinking about, is better trained and is going to think about, working for this company in the future and staying with the company.
Yeah, thank you so much, Treasurer Ma. One last question. Out of curiosity, you mentioned that, bonds of UCR and the UC system. How does your office or you evaluate, new campus debt for housing and academic facilities to ensure affordability over the full life of the bonds? For example, required, coverage ratios or reserve policies. Can you
Yes.
talk about it?
So normally we issue the bonds for the UC and CSU systems, but it is really based on, that chancellor who puts forward the budget and looks at all of, for example, your 9 schools and, puts together that program, that priority list, and then they will kind of work through it and then come to us to help issue the bonds. So we do not set the priorities for the universities and the CSUs. It's really the leadership on each campus. And then there is a UC Board of Regents. There is a CSU Board of Trustees. They also have to approve the plan. And then after that, then they would call on us to issue the bonds. So it's really done at each campus level and then has to go to the board for approval.
I see. Yeah, thank you so much for your all your answers today. And I think now is a great way to stop the podcast.
Okay.
So thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Today we explored different smart financing, clear guardrails for partnership, and all of that. So it is such a great honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to Policy Chats, the official podcast of the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on Instagram at UCR_SPP. To learn more about our program and upcoming episodes, visit spp.ucr.edu. For the video version of this episode, check out our YouTube channel at UCR School of Public Policy. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.